Well, in case we haven't met yet, my name is Alex, in case you haven't picked up on that throughout the morning, and I'm one of the pastors here at Carpenter's Church, and I'm honored to bring you part 1 of 2 of this new series titled How to Neighbor. Now, this series comes from an interesting interaction that Jesus had with someone known as an expert in religious law, and it's recorded for us to read in the book of Luke, starting in chapter 10, verse 25. It starts off saying, one day, an expert in religious law stood up to test Jesus by asking him this question, "Teacher, what should I do to inherit eternal life?" Jesus replied, "Well, what does the law of Moses say? How do you read it?" The man answered, "You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your strength, and all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself." "Right," Jesus told him. "Do this and you will live." The man wanted to justify his actions, and so he asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" Or in other words, and who do I have to love? Love your neighbor. Well, who is my neighbor? Or maybe more accurately, who don't I have to love? Who doesn't qualify as my neighbor? And we'll see a little bit later, Jesus' response is very interesting, and we'll find out maybe this man was asking the wrong kind of question. So I don't know about you, but growing up, I loved having to do class presentations. Anyone? Probably hardly anyone. Apparently, the number one fear is public speaking or something. Some people fear that more than death. I didn't have that. Clearly, as you can see, that's probably why I'm doing what I'm doing right now. But I loved it. And so throughout my elementary school years specifically, we did something called Tusk. So Tusk was every one of the kids in the class was assigned a different job for this weekly presentation day we did. And so one of the jobs that I wanted so bad that I waited forever to have was the job of presenter. And so the presenter got to present something to the class. Pretty self-explanatory. So I watched for weeks leading up to the day I got to be presenter as my friends from school brought all kinds of cool things and cool people from home to present to the class. And so I was just dreaming. I was like, oh man, what am I going to do? And I was thinking, and I came up with a master plan. It was genius. I was so excited. I was planning for weeks for it. So as my name went down the list and it got to presenter, it was my time to shine. So I got ready. It was the day of the presentation, and you know what I did? I did something a little different. I wanted to present how to do something. So I presented how to make a sandwich. I loved sandwiches growing up. I'd have a sandwich every single day growing up in elementary school years. So I was ready. I had this perfect sandwich technique where I wouldn't eat it now, but I made it and then I put half it in the microwave to melt the cheese, which now I think about it's kind of gross because the bread would be really soggy. But at the time I thought it was brilliant. So I was ready to display my sandwich making technique, and it didn't go as I hoped, unfortunately. I was different, right? All my classmates, they just brought something from home to show. I had to be extra and show how to make something, and people didn't like that. It was different. And so they did what people often do when things are different. They laughed at me, and I have emotional scars to show for it. They called me the sandwich girl for weeks after that. They'd be like, "Hey, sandwich girl." Sad. And it was sad to bring a sandwich to school. I was ashamed. A sandwich girl eating a sandwich. Anyways, you can pray for my emotional healing at a later date. But since that day, there have been many other times in my life where I was different. I was the different one. And in those times that I was different, people did what they often do with things that are different. They laughed at me, or they poked jokes at me. They made fun of me. Maybe they avoided me or avoided eye contact. When Facebook came along, maybe they would post it on Facebook and make an even bigger deal about it, or they would exclude me. I'm sure we've all been there at least once or twice. The one on the outside, if you can't think of a time you're on the outside, you must have been a real cool kid and never went through an awkward stage. We can all think of those times. Maybe you showed up to school wearing bell-bottom jeans instead of skinny jeans when skinny jean season came along. Or maybe you're the weird one with a Samsung phone instead of an iPhone. My husband. Or maybe you're the kind of person that would bring a tuna sandwich to the lunchroom and stink the whole place up and get dirty looks for the rest of the day. Anyone? Maybe that's just me. I don't know. Or maybe you grew up with some sort of disability and people didn't understand it, and so all your life you've kind of felt odd, you felt different. Or maybe you were the kid that had the separated family when the rest of your friends, their families were perfect and happy and all together. Or maybe you're the one that grew up with a different skin color than most of the people that you were hanging around with that was in your community. There have all been times when we were the ones that felt on the outside. Being ridiculed for being different is hard. But I think if we're honest, we've all been the one to do the ridiculing as well, right? As soon as we're on the inside, it's really easy to forget how terrible it is to be on the outside. And so maybe we've been the one to poke jokes or laugh or talk behind someone's back, or even just in your thoughts, think about that different person. It's just kind of weird, or try to avoid it. I mean, is it really wrong to want to hang out with people that are just like you? I mean, it's pretty natural, right? We all do it. Maybe you've caught yourself thinking things like, or saying, I just don't like that person, or I just don't like those types of people. Or maybe like, what if I let my kids hang out with those kinds of kids? Like, what if they're a bad influence on my kids? Maybe it was just the way that you grew up. I grew up this way. Like, you just watch out for those kinds of people, or like, oh, they're just different. Or maybe it was more obvious and outspoken in your family. Maybe you've heard or said or thought some of things like, watch out for those brown kids. You might catch something from them, like lice or bad language, or white people are just so entitled. They just get everything they want. Life is so easy and perfect for them. Or don't let your kids go there. Those kids are different. They might be a bad influence on your kids. Meanwhile, your kids have never even gone there, and you've never even gone there yourself. One of the things that one of my friends said was her parents told her to avoid the Indigenous community because she might be targeted for being a different race. Or another one of my friends said that she experiences racism all the time, her and her family, for being different, a different skin color, a different culture. We've all been a part of labeling those that are different than us, especially even without really knowing them, without ever really going to that place ourselves or getting to know those people, hearing their stories. But we've all also been the one on the outside. We know what that feels like, and still, we've all done it. These experiences of racism and judgment and misunderstanding, they're not new to us, and they're not new to God. Jesus experienced some of these same cycles. He saw some of these same things happening. And that's why James, one of his followers, was really clear on what he knew Jesus thought about this. He writes, "Yes, indeed, it is good when you obey the royal laws found in the scriptures, love your neighbor as yourself. But if you favor some people over others, you are committing a sin. You are guilty of breaking the law." And so to Jesus, racism is not a skin issue. Racism is a sin issue. Now, sometimes racism is really obvious, as displayed through certain events in history, but often it's really subtle. It's subtle in the ways that we think, or small comments we make, or who we avoid eye contact with, or who we avoid inviting over to our house, or who we allow our kids to hang out with, or don't allow our kids to hang out with. When we neglect and avoid or overlook those different than us, James records as Jesus felt that this is a sin. And I believe that it breaks God's heart when we live this way. So remember the expert in religious law that asked Jesus, well, who is my neighbor? He wanted to justify his actions. Who do I have to love? Who don't I have to love? Well, let's figure out what Jesus replied with. In verse 30, it's recorded, Jesus replied with a story. A Jewish man was traveling from Jerusalem down to Jericho, and he was attacked by bandits. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him up, and left him half dead beside the road. By chance, a priest came along. But when he saw the man lying there, he crossed the other side of the road and passed him by. A temple assistant walked over and looked at him lying there, but he also passed by on the other side. So basically, there's this guy, and he's beat up, and he's left for dead. And the holy guys come along, and you expect them to do something, right? Like if you were left for dead in the Carpenter's Church parking lot, and Pastor John, our lead pastor, or me, we came to church, and we saw you all beat up, but we had a really important meeting to get to, so we just ran on inside. Like, that's like messed up, right? Like, that's like, hello. Like, it's kind of crazy if you actually picture this happening to you. But the story takes an interesting turn. It says, then a despised Samaritan came along, and when he saw the man, he felt compassion for him. This is an incredible display of compassion because at this time, the Jewish people and the Samaritans were basically living in 100 or 700-year hate fest. They did not like each other, and it was mostly based on racism. And so these holy guys you would expect to help, they don't help. But this Samaritan, he has compassion on him. Of all people, the Samaritan does. Going over to him, the Samaritan soothed his wounds with olive oil and wine and bandaged them. Then he put the man on his own donkey and took him to an inn where he took care of him. The next day, he handed the innkeeper 2 silver coins, telling him, take care of this man. If his bill runs higher than this, I'll pay you the next time I'm here. And so instead of this man asking, well, who do I have to love? Who don't I have to love? Is Jewish people included in this? He just didn't make excuses. He had compassion. He saw this man, he was in need, and so he did something about that need. The Samaritan man intentionally crossed cultural barriers to care for this Jewish man. And the story concludes. Now, which of these 3 would you say was a neighbor to the man who was attacked by bandits? Jesus asked. The man replied, the one who showed him mercy. Then Jesus said, yes. Now go and do the same. So to Jesus, it's not a matter of who you're supposed to love. It's a matter of how you're supposed to love. Because you are to love everybody, always. And how do you love? You show mercy. When you see a need, do something about that need, no matter who is displaying the need. And I think meeting these needs, as seen in the story, is a lot more than just giving a couple dollars and praying from afar and wishing the best for this person. In the story, we see that the Samaritan man, even though he had every excuse not to help, he went over to him. He cared for him. He put him on his own donkey. He got involved in his mess, in his story, in his pain. He cared for his wounds. He took him to an inn. He paid for him to stay there and to stay there even longer, as long as he needed to. The Samaritan man got involved in this Jewish man's mess. He heard his story, he cared for him, he touched him. And the story is an incredible representation of the way Jesus lived his life. Jesus had every excuse not to come to earth. If I was chilling in heaven with all the great things and all the happiness and all the love, who would want to come down here? This place is a mess. But he did. He came. And not only did he come and expect everyone to bow down at his feet while he walked down the street, he knelt down. He went to real people with real messy lives, people that most of us would probably try to avoid. And he went to them and he cared for them. He touched those that everyone else was scared to touch. He heard people's stories. He loved people. He never just gave some money and kept walking or avoided eye contact or refused to touch them because he might get something from them, which is true. He could have easily got leprosy or any of these diseases, but he just did it. He just loved. He didn't ask questions. Well, I'm a little too busy. I'm a little too important. I got every excuse not to. He just did it. He was present with people. And so the next time that you see a need displayed, don't let your first thought be, I'm a little busy, or what if this is like awkward, or like, what if I make a fool of myself, or what if they don't want my help, or these people maybe just aren't worth my time, or my money, my care. I'm a busy person. I got lots to do. Just love them. Without judging whether or not they're in their situation because it's their own fault. Without judging whether their people group should just get over the past and move on. And without judging whether or really allowing your fear of what your kids may think if they see someone like this or know what you did to help them. Your kids might hear real pain and real sadness and real brokenness in the world. Instead of letting those things stop you, just love. Just do it. Just love everybody, always. Hear their stories, care for them, touch them, make eye contact with them, love them unconditionally. Isn't that what Jesus did with you? When he had no reason to love you, he did, and he still doesn't. Guys, we're messed up. I suck a lot, most of the time, and Jesus still loves me. I've been thinking about that. I just mess up so much, and he's never no, that's just too many times, Alex. I can't forgive you again. He always comes. And it's no different for someone who's of a different skin color or who's made more mistakes than I have. Or it's their own fault. They're homeless. They don't deserve my help. They should just get a job. Just love. And let Jesus judge them if that's your biggest concern. Just love everybody always. Now, if you're not a Christian, then you don't have to do this. If you don't say you're a follower of Jesus, you don't have to. But can you imagine the world that we would live in if we just did? Whether we're Christian or not, if we just loved people, everybody, always. But if you are a Christian, if you say you love Jesus, then you have no excuse. Whether you're in kindergarten, or you're in grade 6, or you're an adult, or you're old. It's okay to be old. It's a great thing. Then you have no excuse. It doesn't matter how much money you have or if you're really busy and important or not. You just have to love people. You have to love people. And it's a sin when we show favoritism to some people over others. And it's not enough just to give them some money from afar. I mean, if Jesus is asking you to give, then do it, right? It's different for everyone. But if you want to love Jesus and build lives, especially in the Mayfair community, we can't just give money. We can't just show up on a Sunday morning once a month or even 4 times a month. We can't just pray in the comfort of our homes. So this week I want to challenge every one of you to do something bold, to do something brave, something that's going to be uncomfortable because it's always uncomfortable for me. You might think, oh, this is easy for her. She got it all figured out. No, it's just as awkward for me as it is for you. Cross cultural barriers and have an intentional interaction with someone that's different than you, especially someone of a different culture or skin color, of a different social status. So that could look like next week sitting in a different spot in the church to sit by someone you wouldn't normally sit with. That could look like having conversation with someone after church and inviting them out for lunch with you, going out for coffee with someone. It could look like instead of playing with your kids at the park near your house, come to the park in this neighborhood and meet the families that are there. It could look like inviting an uncomfortable or unfamiliar family over to your home for supper this week. It looks different for all of us. Jesus is calling us all to be a different part of the body, to do a different part of the job. But if you're a Christian, he's calling you to do something. You can't do nothing. Another way that's probably even more uncomfortable for those of you who have kids is challenge them to do it. For example, at the project, we have a lot of students of different skin color, of different families, a lot different than many of yours. And we appreciate our leaders so much. They're so great at loving those students. But what is way more impactful is if there's another student there, and maybe they're different than them, but to be a friend to them. Students need adults to care and influence them and lead them, but they need friends. They need people who are different that's going to love them anyways. So challenge your kids to do it. Carpenter's kids, Carpenter's tots. I don't know what it looks like for your family, but your kids are called to be in this just as much as you are. Your kids are really stinking powerful. Right, kids? You're awesome. Are you awesome? Yes, you are. You are awesome. If you follow Jesus, have the exact same Holy Spirit in you as I do. And I'm up here on stage, and I might look really cool, or I might look kind of like a loser. But thanks. But you have the same Spirit in you. You can do everything I can do or better. Different, but awesome. So kids, parents, don't limit your kids. Never limit what your kids can do. Push them to be brave, because usually they're going to be a lot more brave than you allow them to be. Isn't that true? Don't limit what Jesus can do through them. Challenge them and trust God with them. Because, it's in the Bible. Jesus said, it's by your theology that the world will know that you're my disciples. Garrett reads his Bible. I see a couple head shakes. That's not true. It's by your giving that the world will know you're my disciples. Wrong. I'm lying to you. You should read your Bible more. It's by your happy life and safe, caring kids that the world will know you're my disciples. No. If only it was that easy, right? Jesus said it's by your love that the world will know that you are my disciples. And there's a lot of people in this church and this community that do not know the love of Jesus. And we can't just pray for them to hopefully walk by the church on a Sunday morning and hope that they come in the church door so that they can hear about the love of Jesus. There's a lot better way to share the love of Jesus than just expect them to come to us. Go to them. People need you to love them. If you're a Spirit-filled person, you have Jesus' Spirit inside of you, your love in someone's life in this community will change their lives forever. And all it takes for you to love is love. I say all. It's hard, but it's simple. You don't have to be rich to change someone's life in this community. You don't have to prepare a sermon and preach like I am to change someone's life in this community. I love the passion of our church to love Jesus and build lives. I love the events that we do throughout the year to do that. But I've been in this community long enough to know that it's not enough. It's not enough to invite people to an event with bouncy castles and food once a year, twice a year, and expect them to know Jesus' love. It is a part of the bigger picture, and it is important. It is so fun, and I'm so excited for those events every year, but it's not enough. We have to get involved in people's mess. We have to go to them. We have to go for a walk in this community rather than in your house if you live somewhere else. You have to be present with people, talk with people, hear their stories, love them, and that doesn't cost any money. Imagine the impact we could have as a church in this coming year, in this community, if every single one of you, and maybe you don't go to this church regularly, that's okay. You can do it in your own community. But if every single one of you had an intentional interaction this week that started a long-term relationship with someone in this community. So say if there's 50 people here, that's 50 families impacted by the love of Jesus this year. That costs $0. Imagine the impact. We as staff, we do a lot of different things throughout the week to help people. And the greatest thing that we can do that is always most uncomfortable and sometimes seems like a waste of time is just be there. Is hang out at the school. Go to the schoolyard and see what kids are hanging out there that day. Go for a walk and actually stop to talk to someone in the community. You might think, is that all you do all week? If that's all I did, this community, that would be a good thing. But it's awkward, it's uncomfortable, it's stretching, but that's not just for us to do. Our impact in the Mayfair community would be very small if it's only us. You are just as empowered, just as equipped as we are to go and make disciples. to go and show the world who Jesus is by the way you love. And so what are you going to do? JC, you can come back up. What are you going to do this week? How are you going to connect with someone? And this isn't just for our Mayfair community. Do it at work. Do it in your communities with your literal neighbors where you are. But if you attend this church, then I know that you're probably passionate about reaching the Mayfair community. And that's so awesome. That's why I love being here. And the best way that you're going to do that is just by loving people. And so that could look really different. It could look, we're going to spend a few minutes and ask Jesus, because I don't want to tell you exactly what it is for you, because Jesus is going to tell you. But it could look like going to hang out at the park over here instead of the one by your house. It could look like inviting someone for coffee or over to your house for dinner. It could look like loving people in this community and going for a walk and stopping to talk with people. Talking to someone here, not necessarily to invite them to church or to get them to come here, but just to be with them. And that is how we are going to love Jesus and build lives in this community. That is what is going to have an impact. So no matter how different the people in this community might be than you, or even how similar they might be, just love them. Ask Jesus not who you're going to love this week, because unfortunately you have to love everybody, always. It's not a matter of, Jesus, I will do it when you tell me through the clouds that I see someone and that is the person I have to love. It's not like that. It's everybody. But God has someone specific that you can just start with. Start with someone, somewhere, everybody always, and ask them how. Ask Jesus how you can love them this week. And ask him for forgiveness for the times that you've passed judgment instead of love. For the prejudice you have, that I have, against people of certain culture, certain skin, or certain social status. Ask him that he would give you his heart for his children, whether they know him and follow him or not.